Spider-Man Lotus. You know, I didn't expect a lot going into this movie. After all, the internet's already done its fair share of dragging this one through the mud. But I at least expected to have fun with it in a sort of it's so bad it's good way. Or you know those movies where even if they're terrible, you can still find some enjoyment if you watch it with a friend, maybe have a beer or two while you're at it. But no. How naive I was. See, throughout the entire 2-hour runtime of Spider-Man Lotus, I found myself with feelings of shock, horror, disdain. I mean, the pain of sitting through this was almost immeasurable. Alright, so before I really get into this movie, I first want to address the whole controversy that plagues the film. So in case you didn't know, the people behind this movie are, well, to put it lightly, not so nice folk. There have been a bunch of leaks that came out prior to the film's release that really get into the nitty-gritty of it all, and if that's something you're interested in knowing about, there are plenty of other videos and reviews that get into it. So while I think that whole topic has been covered plenty, I also just want to judge this film for being a Spider-Man film, you know? Like, yes, Gavin, you may not be a great guy, but even without all that horrible context, your Spider-Man movie is still shit. And here's why. Naturally, we're gonna start with the story, so let's jump right in.
No. Wait.
Spider-Man Lotus opens with a voiceover from a pretty sad sounding Peter Parker.
Well, I'm not quite sure where I should start. When I think about you, I don't know. God, it was so much easier then. The world wasn't so upside down.
Who appears to be talking about the late Gwen Stacy, which is immediately giving me Spider-Man Blue vibes. And if that's the story you're choosing to adapt, Gavin, then my expectations are nice and high. We get a pretty neat scene of Spider-Man swinging to the scene, and yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and criticize the CGI of a fan film too much. You can definitely notice the computer effects with the car, but Spider-Man swinging looks pretty good in my opinion. Also, the speed limit thing was a nice touch, I'll admit, I liked it. So we cut to a car pulling up in an alleyway, followed by Spider-Man arriving to greet— Wait, is that Shocker? Alright, never mind, this movie is clearly perfect. Alright, for real, the costumes are all well and good, but like, why does he look like he's having a seizure in every scene? It just looks, a little awkward, a little silly. So yeah, Spider-Man lo and behold ends up winning the day with some good old-fashioned— Whoa, Spider-Man, did you just kill those people? Seriously, he just straight up uses these poor powerless guys as shields, like, what the hell, Spider-Man? Well look, aside from the awkward acting by Shocker and his goons, as well as the little attempted spider murder, I can't criticize this part too harshly. I think it's fun enough, and if this film was literally just what we've seen so far, it'd honestly be a pretty decent little Spider-Man short film. Unfortunately, that was just the best 6 minutes of this 2-hour long movie. So the next time we see Peter, he's meeting up with Harry, MJ, and Gwen, and they all appear to be a little upset with him after he missed a movie. Typical Spider-Man stuff. Peter suggests they all go get a bite to eat, but Gwen isn't a fan, and oh my god, you know what? I can't do it anymore. I've been sitting down attempting to watch this thing, scene by scene as I write my script, and I can't. This movie is so painstakingly boring, I think it's broken me. And that's the worst part, really. I can go on and on about how every fucking scene, aside from the opening, is just sad, dramatic gibberish, with a generic, dark piano song horribly mixed over it.
Harry, I've lived my whole life trying to be someone else. Trying to be the girl that everyone knew. You don't think I came back from this party sobbing? You don't think I went to sleep every night the same scared girl I've always been?
Or how absolutely none of these characters are portrayed in a remotely likable light. But the worst part about it all is just that it's so goddamn boring. And this is meant to be a Spider-Man movie from a fan of the character? Seriously, I don't know anyone who could have looked at a scene like this.
Look, you weren't the only person who lost something that day. But you can't admit that because you're too selfish to think about anyone else. Nothing is ever a problem until it affects you.
And thought, yep, that's Spider-Man. Alright, mini rant over. So yeah, we get a few scenes of these guys all hanging out and grabbing a bite to eat over, you guessed it, piano music, and it's revealed afterwards that Peter is planning to propose to Gwen, although he's cut off by the sound of sirens, and we then jump to a long-ass opening title sequence, over some very artsy sounding music. Just to let you know you should feel sad. Alright, but seriously, the art is actually pretty good, but like, the hell am I supposed to be sad over? Like, obviously it's Gwen's death, but that's because I know the character. If you had no idea who Spider-Man was, I'd imagine you'd be pretty confused as to what's going on since they refused to show her death at all. which is a bit weird to me since how she died is such a pivotal moment for the character. So to decide to not show it at all in a movie about her death is a weird choice there, Gavin. Granted, they do show a bit more later on in the movie in a flashback where he's holding her body, but yet again, you're showing everything but the thing you should be showing. I mean, what's the saying again? Show don't tell, stupid? And yeah, aside from these super dramatic black and white flashbacks, which is like 2 scenes by the way. The rest of this movie is just people being really upset with each other. Peter is upset with MJ because she treats life like a party, in a scene that feels painfully out of character for Peter.
You're a joke.
What?
I knew you couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle what?
Not being the center of attention just for a second. The life of the party loses her spotlight and doesn't know what to do with herself.
That's not true.
It is true. You're so unaware of yourself, it's not even funny.
I mean, maybe if the dude was wearing the black suit, I could see him acting like this, but this is just regular old Pete? Yeah, this is too much for me. It's a great way to make your protagonist seem super unlikable in less than 20 minutes into the movie, so good job there. MJ and Peter are upset with Harry because he's on drugs, but the way the movie decides to handle that whole plotline is about what you'd expect from an 18-year-old writing their first movie with these sort of themes in it. And MJ and Harry are upset with Peter because the dude is always a no-show. But yet again, you wouldn't know that because aside from the one scene at the start, this movie hates to establish anything about its core cast, which is a huge problem when you're trying to have us believe all these guys are such good friends. Because as the movie presents their relationship, I have no idea why any of these guys would talk to each other, especially to Peter. And can anyone actually tell me what sort of arc MJ and Harry go on in this movie? Because it just seems like they're waiting around for Peter to resolve any grief he has, without actually making any significant changes themselves. Poor Harry is probably the worst example I can think of. They bring up his whole drug abuse and make a whole deal about it, but does the movie actually show this guy try and get help for his issues? No, he just walks around looking sad at the camera up until the end of the movie where him and Peter make amends. Look, I see what they're trying to do here. Peter and MJ getting together out of grief, Harry and his drug addiction, they're all pretty big storylines in the 616 universe, but they were still Spider-Man stories at the end of the day, and that entails a certain amount of, I don't know, fun? I mentioned before that it seems pretty clear to me that Gavin was taking inspiration from Spider-Man Blue when making Lotus, but something was clearly lost in translation because this just feels like Spider-Man Blue, but if you decide to strip away all the heart and soul that book has to offer. So for those who don't know, Spider-Man Blue is a miniseries that details Peter and Gwen's relationship before her demise. Every issue gives us a moment in time between the gang, and usually a big bad rook up which leads to Peter having to run off and deal with a villain. Is it a sad book? Sure, it has its moments, but it's still full of witty humour and fun action scenes to help break it all up. And that's where Spider-Man Lotus messes up big time. It's all well and good having a 3-minute music video of Harry Osborn sightseeing New York, but you better follow that up with a lizard man trying to turn all of New York City into dinosaurs. Because I can guarantee you, no one puts on a Spider-Man movie to sit through this. Now I just gotta mention this super quickly, but like, why do they keep using the 90s animated theme? This might sound like a nitpick, and maybe it is, but this isn't that version of the character. I get it, it's a cool theme. But don't just use it because people know what it is. Make your own goddamn theme, man. It just makes me mad hearing it because it reminds me that I could be watching anything else right now. Alright, what other scenes do we have that I can talk about? People walking, people being upset, people walking and being upset. You see what I mean? Even talking about this movie sucks because all there is to talk about is this. Look, the movie is bad, it's boring. I can't talk about it for much longer. Seriously, the amount of writer's block this movie has caused me isn't healthy. But before I finish this poor attempt at a video, I want to talk about one specific part of this movie that actually isn't just people being sad. Well, not entirely. And that's Spider-Man and the little sick kid. Or the kid who collects Spider-Man, if you know where they're going with this. So in my opinion, this whole part of the movie highlights just how much Gavin doesn't get this character. So Spider-Man basically meets this terminally ill kid called Tim. Now Tim here is a big fan of Spider-Man if you couldn't tell, and his dying wish was meeting his #1 hero, Spider-Man. So the scene plays out about as you would expect. Spider-Man and Tim play some video games, Spidey tells Tim about how his powers work, and it's all very cute stuff. Honestly, this is all well and good, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a whole hour of this movie. Enjoyment. Yeah, call me crazy, but seeing Spider-Man make a kid's day was actually fun to see, even more so than Harry popping pills. But, like the grand achievements of the Hindenburg, it was short-lived, because while these two are playing a game, poor Tim decides to ask Spider-Man,
"Hey, Spider-Man?
Yeah, Tim?
What happened to the girl on the bridge?"
and Peter proceeds to react like his grandkid just asked him about the war. Tim asks Spider-Man if it's true, and what does Spider-Man tell this dying child? You know, the kid whose one wish was to see his hero Spider-Man? Well, he basically tells Tim that he sucks and that all the shit he collects is worthless.
Look, I'm not the hero that you think I am. And this, all of this, it's not me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Spider-Man? Like, I know Gavin is trying to tell us that Spider-Man has some self-doubt at the moment, and by tell us I mean scream it to our face. But Jesus, man, not like this. You know, you can have Spidey feeling a little down on himself, while also still having to remember he's gotta, you know, at least put on the act for a fucking sick kid. Because this Spider-Man just straight up has enough of trying to convince little Tim he's full of shit, and decides to leave. God, it can't get any more awkward, right? Right? Well, after a scene of MJ and Harry screaming at each other over drug abuse, you know, to help break up the last Debbie Downer scene, we cut back to Tim's house, where I guess Tim's mum found the poor kid crying into his bed sheets, because she appears around the hallway like a jump scare and asks Spider-Man how it went. Spider-Man proceeds to tell old mum what happened with Tim, and she responds by basically saying, "Get the fuck back in there and cheer my dying kid up." And she's not wrong. You're meant to be Spider-Man, my guy. So yeah, Spider-Man gets defeated by Mum, and he has to walk back into Tim's room and pretend he's a hero or something, I don't know. But seriously, he apologizes to Tim, and Tim decides to show him a bunch of cool newspaper clippings, highlighting all the people Spider-Man saved. This gives Spidey the self-confidence he needs, because remember, we're not here for the sick kid, it's all about you, Peter. And we end the scene with Tim and Spidey having a heart-to-heart, where he reveals his secret identity because, like, you know, Tim ain't got long. But yeah, this whole Spider-Man and Tim stuff just goes on for way too long. And the problem is you could have cut out the whole Spider-Man walking out of the room only to be scolded by the mum, and instead just establish earlier on that Peter's got a lot of insecurity. That way Peter can show up and put on an act for Tim, only to instead be inspired by how much this little kid adores and admires him. So you still end it with Peter gaining confidence. You just remove all that awkward fat. But what do I know? I'm not a writer, just a dumb guy on the interwebs. So yeah, now that Peter's got everything he needed from the sick kid, he's finally able to put his grief aside and stop being a complete a-hole to all his friends. Except no, because at the very end of the film, he abandons all of them to be Spider-Man. And that's portrayed as a good thing? Okay, so No Way Home did something pretty similar, except the final swing was both grand and somber, to convey the fact that Peter is making a pretty significant sacrifice in choosing to be Spider-Man. But this movie just portrays it as a good thing, with heroic music and all. I don't know, it just seems like a dick move to miss Flash's going away party while cheering as you swing away. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole movie. Spider-Man and the gang are sad about Gwen for an hour, Peter meets a dying kid and realizes he can actually do some good, and everyone makes amends as Peter abandons his friends. Yay, again. I'll be honest, this movie was so hard to talk about, and I know I missed some stuff, but I'm not a director or a writer. I've never made a movie before, and the things I missed was more so because the issues I had with those scenes were on a technical level. And this is a fan film, so I don't want to be overly harsh on things I wouldn't even expect from a fan film to begin with. But when you strip away the technical issues of the film, you're basically left with talking about these painfully long, sad scenes between characters I just don't care about. Yeah, do they look like Mary Jane, Gwen, etc.? Yeah, I guess. But that's about where the similarities to their comic book counterparts end. And look, if comic accurate outfits, nostalgic 90s music, and watered down adaptations of better stories is what Gavin considers to be peak cape shit, then he's no better than the superhero movies he criticizes. And that's it. I can't talk about this movie any longer for fear of my sanity slipping. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more content like this, drop a like and subscribe. And remember, true believers,
You're a joke.
What?